This panel is how to enter and navigate the world of episodic directing. We have Cazhhmere Downey, director. Please, round of applause. Joyce Wong, director. Sid Santiago Zanforlin, director as well. And this conversation is moderated by Samora Smallwood, writer, director, and actress. I invite everyone to come onto the stage, please.
Hello, friends. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. You can give yourselves a round of applause. This is going to be such a fun conversation because we all love TV. It's so great. I don't sleep because of it. Every night, watching your shows. I am so excited to be here to speak to these illustrious directors. Our first director has over 20 years of experience in formats ranging from music videos, documentaries, to TV. She has directed music videos for national and international artists such as the Backstreet Boys and Cardinal Offishall. In 2018, she retired from music videos to shift her focus to TV, and her most recent works include directing episodes of CTV's hit comedy Shelved and CBC's Murdoch Mysteries. And Heartland, I believe. Yeah. Cazhhmere is a dynamic storyteller specializing in developing stories from a provocative, diverse, and inclusive POV. Her series Out of Pocket is in development and was selected for the TIFF 2023 Series Accelerator. Let's give a warm welcome to a director we are so pleased to sit with, Cazhhmere Downey. Our next very esteemed panelist is an award-winning writer and director who was described by the LA Times as a major talent to watch. Her debut narrative feature, Wexford Plaza, a dark comedy that screened in competition at Slam Dance in 2017, was awarded the Comcast Best Narrative Feature Award by the Center for Asian American Media in San Francisco, and nominated for the Toronto Film Critics Association's Best Canadian Film Award. On the episodic side, she has directed on shows such as Sort of for HBO Max, we're calling it Max, The Sticky on Amazon, Baroness Von's sketch show, Fakes on Netflix, Workin' Moms, Spencer Sisters, and Run the Burbs. Join me in welcoming Joyce Wong. And last but certainly not least is a writer-director who is a CFC graduate who has written and directed short films, music videos, 2 feature films, and over 90 episodes of both factual and scripted TV. In another life, he's a Juno-nominated punk artist, but in this one, he is a Banff TV Award-nominated and visionary director. Give it up for Sid Santiago Zanforlin. And I am Samora Smallwood, Canadian Screen Award-winning actress, writer, director, creator, advocate, and believer, and I'm so excited to sit with you today. I would love to jump right in and ask our directors to share with us, when did you first realize you wanted to be a television director, and what were your initial steps to take that from an idea into an action?
I guess I'm seated here, so I should answer it first. Okay. I think after I directed my feature, directing a feature is like a very lonely process, right? And then, I realized that, I wanted to be part of, film production in a way that was more, community oriented. And so on a very practical level, I gravitated towards TV because I wanted to be with a bunch of people who all shared the same dream, worked together, and didn't make a story every 6 years or whatever, right? So I guess that's what was the first spark and interest in wanting to work in more of a collaborative kind of sense with writers and showrunners and that sort of thing.
For me, honestly, my spark sort of happened when I was a kid. I'm kind of a, chase your childhood dream, person. I've been a TV junkie since I was a little girl, and from a very young age, I was just always more fascinated with the making of television as opposed to the television show itself. What I mean by that is like, remember old sitcoms when they used to have a TV audience, and at the end of a lot of the shows, they would reveal the TV audience. Usually like the star of the show would come out and you'd see the audience and whatnot, and that was always the most fascinating thing for me, like when they would reveal the set, and I'd be like, oh my God, there's no ceiling, that's so cool. Like, I was just literally so fascinated with that. I think it just comes from, I was an only child for the first 10 years of my life, and I was raised by a single black mother, so I spent a lot of time having to entertain myself. And my entertainment was very elaborate. Like, my imaginary world wasn't just having an imaginary friend. I literally had like imaginary like movie TV world, and I was always making up stories and like literally like filming them. So like once I learned as a kid, like seeing who the people were behind the set, like, oh, that's the director, okay, that's the camera person, that's the person that's yelling action, that's the person that's putting on the hair and makeup, and I'd literally be at home playing make-believe, make up a story and play all those roles, like, and the actress. I'd be the director and I'd talk to myself, be like, okay, I want you to do this, and then I'd jump around and be the actor, be like, okay, I gotta do this, and then like literally like yell action and then like act out these elaborate scenes, you know? So it's just like, I was just literally born to be this, but where it starts as a young adult for me was I was a music kid. Music was like my first love. It was what taught me to tell stories. And so my first entry into becoming a filmmaker was music videos. And I started directing music videos. My first entry was I worked at Much Music in the early 2000s, like 2002, when it was still a real music station, and they played music videos. Music videos were still played on TV, and artists came by. And how that happened for me is like when, at that time, music videos, there was still like film applied to making music videos. All music videos were still shot on film, and if you were a Canadian music video director at that time, there was this pressure to still visually compete with the American artists because music videos are played on TV. So if your video didn't look as good as Britney Spears' music video, it wasn't gonna get played on TV, but we had to do it with a fraction of the money. And so I had to come up with big, elaborate ideas, but get creative on how to execute those things. And somewhere along the way, I just realized my knack for doing that was being wasted in music videos. I'm literally making mini TV episodes. So that kind of, forced me to figure out a long journey to how to get into TV, which I'm sure we'll talk about with other questions later. But that's where the spark happens for me.
Shout out to Britney Spears.
Shout out to Britney.
Yeah. This woman has been through it.
Yes.
That was an era, though. That was such a vibe. Music videos really had that moment where you had to see them. You all remember this, right? You had to see them. They were mini movies, and it was like a huge, huge deal. That would be an amazing, stomping ground and learning space. Sid, what about you? When did you learn, when did that spark come that you wanted to direct for TV, and then what were initial steps to go from an idea into the action of it?
Yeah, you triggered so many memories. And the one that you just triggered was being a kid, going to Chile, all my family's from there, and being told all these ghost stories of relatives appearing at the foot of the bed at that very moment where they were dying, miles away. And that always freaked me out. And then when I started seeing all those great movies in the 80s, the horror movies and magic realist movies and ghost stories, I'm like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And then music kind of took me a little bit, a little detour, but I started music videos as well. I started doing music videos, and whenever I did music videos, it was always like, how could I do kind of horror, kind of ghost stories in those music videos? And so and then I went to Concordia. I got a little frustrated that it wasn't happening fast enough, so I went became a Nayatse cameraman in Vancouver. And the reason I say that is because I worked primarily in TV and kind of loved that feeling of being in a crew and just working more than a couple months a year. I wanted to work all the time. I loved being on a set. And so for me, I'm still pursuing the love of genre from when I was a kid. and just trying to be on sets as much as I can. And that's TV.
Nice. Okay, I have a question for the aspiring television directors who are here. Make some noise. Are you an aspiring television director? They're coming for your jobs. Just kidding. There's enough food on the plate for us all. That's the mentality. That's the mindset shift for us as Canadian creators.
We'll be showrunners by then, and then we'll be able to hire all of them.
Right? I love that manifesting.
Exactly.
Okay, Cazhhmere. What are the top 3 pieces of advice that you would give to help these aspiring television directors transition from directing their own projects to becoming a director for hire on someone else's vision?
I guess the first piece of advice I would say is just to be open, because there's not one way to get there. Like, as you've already heard, like both like Sid and Cazhhmere had like completely different ways of getting there. Like I came up through like cinematography, right? And so just to don't be dead set on like needing to hit certain like guideposts that you've seen other people hit. Like everyone is going to do it their own way, and that's what's unique and special about you as a filmmaker and your voice. So just take the opportunities as they come, and just like see where that leads you, if that makes sense. And so that's like kind of my biggest piece of advice for kind of going into the route of TV directing.
Top 3 tips. I'd say for me, tip number 1 is study the craft, the field. And what I mean by that is not just study how to direct, because there's no one way on how to direct. Every director I know has their own approach to directing. But what I mean by that is TV makers watch a lot of TV. Like, I watch any and everything, not just the shows that I personally like as a fan. I literally watch everything. Any person that I encounter and engage in a conversation, I'm always asking them, what are you watching? And I have a list in my iPhone, in my notes app, that is all shows to watch, because I want to watch any and everything, because I want to know what's being made, and then I want to figure out why it's being made. I want to know what shows were successful and watch them to know why they were, what made them successful. I watch shows that weren't successful, so I know what didn't make them successful, so I know first not to do those things, or where it could have gone different, and just the different styles of TV shows. Like, there's so many different styles of making a comedy. There's so many different ways to make a drama or a thriller or a family show or YA television, you know? So I when I'm not on set, when I'm not in meetings, when I'm not in prep, I am probably watching a TV show, you know? So that's, I'd say tip number 1 for me. Tip number 3, I would say, is, I guess, putting yourself out there. And that could be in many different ways. It's meeting a lot of different filmmakers. It's doing, you know, all the different programs, especially in a country like Canada, where there are plenty of programs such as, like, you know, I did Reelworld's E20, like I did every program. I've worked with all the different organizations, Reelworld, CFC, the Academy, you know, BIPOC, film and television. I've done them all because it's a great way to meet people. I go to festivals, not just the major festivals, you know, I go to the smaller ones as well, to meet any and everyone, like I said, producers, directors, writers, you know, to build community and network and, you know, expand my Rolodex, so to speak. And then I'd say my 3rd tip would be, no matter what stage of your career that you're at, keep learning always. Art is a progressive field, and there's always something to learn. And in that, I'll say, by keep learning, sometimes that involves a lot of like humbling yourself and knowing that in the different stages of your career growing, there's always a reset moment. You get to a certain level, then you've got to reset, start at level 1. You know, I've had to humble myself, and there have been times where I've felt like I was starting from the bottom all over again. When I directed music videos for 15 years, and as Samora said in my bio, like I got to a height where I was directing music videos for not just top artists in this country, but globally known artists like Snoop Dogg and the Backstreet Boys. But then when I decided I needed to separate myself from the music video world, because they kind of group music video directors in a whole separate category of filmmaking, I had to sort of humble myself and start at the very bottom of climbing a whole different ladder, knowing that I've come with 15 plus years of directing experience. I've traveled the world, worked with some of the best cinematographers and crew members in the industry, both locally and internationally. But yet, when you step into the narrative TV world, it's like a whole different ballgame, and they don't care how much experience you've had or whatever. They want to know, can you navigate this world? And that, for my own self, required me to, at many points, humble myself and be okay with starting from the bottom, climbing my way back up to the top. So,
can I actually quickly touch on something that you said that I think is so important, because we are all so busy, the grind is real, and there is so much to do. Studying the craft and watching the things that you aspire to make. It always makes me think of this quote that Quinta Brunson, the creator of Abbott Elementary, would say, is you study all those greats and then you see where your voice is needed, and it actually ends up inspiring you. And it can be very frustrating when you hear people say, oh, I don't have time for movies, I don't have time for shows. So I think that that's a really great piece of advice, because then you get inspired to see where your voice and your style is actually needed, and how a formula can be applied to even using your voice in a unique way. That really resonated with me. What about you, Sid? What pieces of advice would you give to people who are looking to branch out from, maybe creating their own work into stepping into directing on someone else's vision?
Yeah, I mean, craft is number one for me. I've taken a bit of a long road in the sense that I did camera for 7 years. I directed theater for years, and then became a writer for years. I wanted to learn the craft. I wanted to know all those things. And when people ask me, yeah, but I don't really need to know about camera. I don't really need to know that. I'm like, no, challenge yourself. Know all that stuff. No, because especially when I was a camera guy, I noticed a lot of directors didn't know how to talk to actors. And that's the biggest reason why I went into theater, is I wanted to get over that hurdle, right? Know the lenses, know how to block, know how to move, know the dance of the choreography, know all that stuff. It's amazing. And find community. That's number two. Community. Find other people as passionate as you. Find other people that maybe know a little bit more than you with certain things, and immerse yourself in that community. As directors, we should be hanging out with other directors. We should not be shy to help each other out and to talk about the craft. There's amazing ways to meet community. Karen Walton does this ink drinks once a month. People are doing it all the time. Put yourself out there. And then thirdly, it's make stuff. You just got to make stuff. Fail fast, as I learned from Pixar films, is you got to do it. Get failure out of the way. Don't try to keep failure at bay. Just make stuff, fail, learn, keep doing, keep doing, keep doing.
Big time. Okay. This whole thing, when we did our little chitty chat before this panel, talking about learning from every department and how you're going to learn is so empowering. I directed a series for the first time, and the lenses, once you dig into that work, and then you get to see all of the amazing filmmakers that you love and the lenses they're known for and what the lenses can do, it was honestly one of the most exciting things I can remember of recent times in my life, of being like, oh shit, okay, so that's what Christopher Nolan is doing, and that's what that lens can do. Love it. Okay, so I'm glad that you all brought up community and networking, because I wanted to ask about that. It is one of my favorite topics, as I have found it to be the biggest needle pusher in my own career, even beyond talent. I mean, it goes without saying, you have to be talented. The opportunity comes, you got to be ready, boo-boos. But in this business, networking is so important. I would love to hear your thoughts and advice on the power of networking, both upwardly but laterally. And how have you approached networking at the beginning of your career and then now from this position of power?
So I think one of the things one has to think about is your champions can come from the most unlikely of sources. I think when people, think of like traditionally networking, everyone's kind of looking up and trying to meet gatekeepers, and that's all important and all. But you can find your strongest champions among each other, because everyone's going to progress, everyone's career is going to grow. And like for me myself, like a lot of the people that got me in the door in television were my peers, people that I worked in camera with, people I worked in cinematography with. They heard that there needed to be some TV director, and then someone recommended me. And so just make sure that you guys are like in the community supporting your peers and meeting each other as well, because not only will it be fruitful in the future, but also it's amazing in the present, right? Like this thing we're doing is really hard, it's really lonely, and having other people doing the same thing at the same level as you are, it's really, really inspiring to have your people around you doing it, because it's really hard to keep on going every day, to be the source of creative and to start something. But if you see other people doing it, it's so much easier, and also it's fun, right? So
fun. Oh my gosh, I have to touch on this, because that is one of the most important things I think about networking, is doing that with your peers, because it is so hard that when you see people in your community doing the thing, to reach out and say, do you have a link for that short film that you're doing? How can I show up and support you? And then I feel like the energy kind of shifts as well, because you're still curious and you're not being like a grabby little taker. And I feel even just energetically for yourself, without even getting an external validation, it really matters. So that is just like seismic shift when you look at networking that way, to not just be trying to go to the people who can gatekeep now, because your friends will open the door for you. And I'm sure you've all experienced that moment when somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, I see that thing you're doing, I'm interested, I'm gonna put a witness on you, can you share it, I'm rooting for you. So that's like so important, I think. And then those people do eventually go and make a thing, and they're like, hey, you weren't an a-hole, I would love to work with you.
I'm a showrunner now. Hey, let's go do what we were doing when we're making low budget shorts together.
Yeah, no, I agree, because like when I started making my shift into episodic directing, like my first shadow stints all came not from me knowing the showrunners or the production company and the producers. It actually came from fellow music video directors. Like there was a show called Backstage. I think it aired on like Nickelodeon, something like that. But it was like Family Channel in Canada and some American YA. It was like Degrassi, but for art school kids. The show Backstage. And the showrunner just decided that they wanted to hire all music video directors to direct all the episodes, and all of those directors just happened to be my peers that I came up in the music video world with, who had started their leap into episodics a lot sooner than I did. I was still in the music video world, but it was Warren P. Sonoda. If you're a member of the DGC, you know who Warren is. And Warren was a director, a music video director, mentor to us at the time. We used to call Warren the samurai cowboy, because country music videos were his thing, because he loves country music. And so at the time, Warren was the country music guy. So it was Warren, it was Director X, who had already been a longtime friend and mentor to myself and many other directors, because he's like the GOAT of music videos, if you ask me. Director RT Thorne was another director that was directing on the show. RT and I know each other because we had started working together. We were both interns at Much Music in 2002, and then RT started a music video production company while we were interning at Much Music, and I was the first director that he signed to his roster, and we kind of came up in that trajectory. And Wendy Morgan, who was also a music video director, did a lot of stuff for like the Rascals, can't remember the name of a bunch of the artists from out west. And Wendy and I were peers because it's still kind of the same, it's kind of different, but for the most part in the directing, in the film world, they kind of want to pit female directors against each other, like we're each other's competition. I don't do that with men, where it's like, oh no, there's only one spot. But with women directors, there's always this thing where there can only ever be one. But like Wendy and I were never like down with that BS, and we became friends. We always laughed at the fact that they always want to pit us against each other when we were both at the height of our music video careers. And so like my shadowing on Backstage started with RT, because that's my big brother and one of my best friends. And then when I come on set for RT's block, and all of those other directors saw that I was shadowing, they're like, well, come shadow our episode right after. And then I ended up shadowing the entire season, because those were all my homies, and they were like, okay, well, you're gonna do our, Dex was like, you're doing mine next, and then Worm was like, you're doing mine next, and then Wendy was like, you're doing mine next. And then, so I was able to establish a relationship with the writers, the producers, and the showrunners, and those are like my first ins into the episodic TV world, because the showrunners, they were known for the YA and the youth TV world. You know, they did cartoons like 16. I don't know if you guys remember a cartoon called 16, but that was like their niche, and that was like my first in, because then they, after Backstage, they invited me to shadow on a lot of their other shows, but it didn't start from me knowing them. It started from, like you saying, like my peers, people that I came up with.
Okay, so really quick, I want to ask both of you, and then Sid, I'd love for you to add this to your answer as well. So whether you're networking with peers or you are hoping to, because, you know, closed mouths don't get fed, speak with people who can really move the needle for you, what's that follow-up look like? What's that piece of the networking? I feel like demystifying that is really important, because it takes a lot of vulnerability to get good at networking, because you are actually saying, I need help, and I have an offering, and those two things can be very vulnerable. So what's that follow-up look like? Because I feel like a lot of people, you're all here, hopefully you will meet 3 new people at least that you didn't know before you came, but then sometimes the fumble will happen in that follow-up. What's that look like for you, or what has it looked like for you, and how has that moved the needle?
So, Sid, do you want to answer first?
I was just going to say, when you decide that, fuck it, I'm good enough, and you just ask, right? You just, fuck it, I'm gonna ask. What's wrong with asking? But there's another switch that happened to me too.
We don't know anything about rejection in this room.
Yeah, once you get used to that, you're right. No, there's something that happens once you realize, especially with all the funding that we're dependent on the government, that you're only gonna get 1 out of every 10, 1 out of every 12, then you're okay with it. Then you're like, okay. Or if this person's gonna say no to me, okay. But it doesn't mean I gotta stop asking. The other thing is that shift that happened to me is I wanna be, what do you call it? When you're always a connector. I wanna be a connector and meet other connectors, and we're all just helping each other out. That's a shift as well into the following up and things like that. Well, I'm following up not just for me, but I'm following up because I might be the wrong person, but I know somebody else that would be perfect for that. And when you get that mindset, and we're all just helping each other out and connecting each other, I think that's a positive way to be.
Really powerful and good for your reputation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I have a question for my lovely directors. Collaboration in TV is so key, in the business in general, but especially on TV. We've all talked about, you know, that family feeling of a crew. But when you are directing for someone else's vision, there are challenges. I would love for you to speak to what you find to be the biggest quote-unquote challenge of bringing your unique style and talent to someone else's vision, and then what's your favorite part of that process?
Okay. Oh my God. I just love working on shows and on TV and collaborating. So it's hard for me to like kind of see, I guess the ways because all I could see are kind of the benefits, like, you know, having 5 people be thinking about the same idea and like all like spitfiring, throwing out like suggestions. I find that's like so much more fruitful than like being like a miserly person at home trying to figure it out all yourself, right? So I guess like I'll start with like what I love about collaboration in TV. Like as I was saying earlier, you're all dreaming the same dream, right? Like the showrunner will have a vision, they'll have the story, and then you subscribe to it, right? And as an episodic director, you try to figure out where your skills fit within that. Because they hired you for a reason. They didn't hire you just to kind of go through the numbers, right? There's something about your skill set, about your voice that they feel like is an added value to their show, right? And so the first thing I do when I go onto a show, I figure out what they see in me that they like and how that can contribute to their show, right? And so after that, it's just trying to figure out how to slide it in. Because another thing too is the writers, the DP, 2 DPs, like production designer, showrunner, producer, they've all been working on this for like a year probably already. And they're probably been in production for 6 months. So when you slide in there, like you're probably only there for 2, right? And so there's a machine that works that's already built, hopefully, when it's good. And so how do you slide in there in the most frictionless way as possible and contribute? And so I think sometimes that's kind of a bit difficult because things are already a certain way and people don't really explain what's going on. And so you kind of just have to figure it out all yourself. But you're also looked at as a leader, right? So like how you kind of go into a show it's a lot different than the second art assistant, right? Wherever they probably have a huge primer on what's up, like what the process is, who's like you kind of have to just go in there, figure out what's up, and a lot of the times it's a lot of like just people skills on who to go to because a lot of the shows, even though it's kind of the structure for all the same shows, sometimes it's like slightly different for each, So yeah, I think like just like making sure like you're fitting in a way that is the most helpful, but also it's for the show. Like I think it's the one thing that I think every time you're on a show, it's the one thing you should figure out. Yeah.
I heard a number once that when you do a show for a showrunner, really you're only putting about 15% of your vision.
Yeah.
You can deviate about 15%, but the rest is you got to be true to the vision of the showrunner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, my process, I learned how to navigate this fairly early, as we were talking about in our discussion with the 4 of us. Is like I said, for me, music videos was the best film school that I could have ever went to, because when you are a music video director, like Episodic directing, you are essentially a director for hire. They're hiring you to step into their world. And it's the same when you work with music artists, right? It's like that artist already has an image overall about who they are, and depending on the project or that album that they're putting out, they've probably done a couple music videos for it already, unless you're doing the lead single from their album. But even still, it's like, my job is to fit into their vision, their image that they've already established. I can't just come in and all of a sudden turn a rapper into some shock rock looking type of dude. You know what I'm trying to say? But also, and you're also dealing with a number of voices in your head. You've got the label, you've got the A&R, you've got the manager, you've got, all these people who have already made decisions on the direction and the trajectory of where this project is gonna go. And like I said, I spent 15 years learning that. So that really trained me to be able to, like I said, I find episodic directing very similar to the music video world in that aspect. And like you were just saying, as the director, you're probably only gonna get about 15% of yourself in there. And how I've navigated that is I've taken a tactic I used when I used to do music videos and when I did music videos, it was whatever, I wrote the treatment, whatever, it came from idea, but it came from also researching. So just like in a TV show, I researched the show, I watched as many previous seasons as I can, because I'm not just gonna come in and try to change Heartland and all of a sudden make it look like Euphoria, like that's just, they're not gonna hire me, they're gonna be like, yeah, like in pre-production, those prep meetings will end very quickly, you get me? But, so I've researched, and like music videos, I researched the artist, what their vibe is, what their aesthetic, and try to figure out, the best concept for this song that they presented to me, and my approach was always, I gotta give them what they want, but for me, I learned this from a music video director by the name of Hype Williams. And he just said, like, as a music video director, find one thing that you can contribute, that is, as a creative, essential, like you, authentically you and your vision, whether it's an editing technique, a particular lens you want to use for a scene or the whole video, a location, you know what I mean? Whether it's, I'm going to do this whole video in black and white or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, just choose one thing, and then that feeds that creative in you, that artist in you, to be able to fit what the label and all those things are going to push you to want to do, because it's their vision. And the same, I apply that same rule in my episodic stuff as well. So sometimes it's, I want to use a particular crane for this opening scene or this establisher scene in the episode, or it's like this scene, I want to shoot it with this particular lens or whatever. But I just find that one thing that is like my signature, like my vibe, that fits into the episode. And it's different for every episode, you know, but I figure that out sometime during the prep, where it's just like, all right, you know, I just worked on, did an episode of Heartland, and a particular scene, I was like, I want to do this with a drone. And they were like, I freaking love it, let's do it. You don't really use drones on Heartland a lot.
But then all the horses just ran off because of the noise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, actually, the horse needed to run off. You know what I mean? So it was perfect. But you know, I was just like, hey, are you guys, like, I give them what they want, and I know because I've studied the show, and we've had all these prep meetings, and I'm learning, you know, how their ecosystem works. And then, like, this one scene is like, hey, how about if we do this with a drone? And it was appropriate. It felt right for the particular scene, you know, and they were down with it, and I got my drone shot. And as a creative, I was happy, and it fit with, you know, the whole vibe of the episode, and they loved it. They ended up shooting more stuff with a drone.
I want to add one thing that you triggered, which is the one thing that you could do. Also, I find it important to find out the one thing that the showrunner is conscious or not conscious of, but places a lot of importance on. The showrunner might play a lot of importance on extreme close-ups or whatever, and to find that out, because sometimes in tonal meetings, they're not conscious of it, or they don't express it, and for you to find out what that one thing that is super important to them and know that will help.
I think it's such an important thing that you're touching on too, is that it keeps coming up, the research and the preparedness of knowing what world you're going into, right? Because that's going to help you, it sounds like, when you're coming in to direct that world, to not only, even at the pitching stage, I imagine, when you're saying, I'm the person for this job, you would have to know what the world of that show is. And then the freedom of saying, okay, and within this formula and this established world, here's where I'm going to put my flourish, and you can be better equipped to make that choice. Because we watch our shows, like now it happens all the time, when you're saying, like, I'll notice a camera movement, and I'll go on IMDb and be like, oh, that's that director who directed this last season. You start to really see how that works, and then that's how, I guess, you put your style into the existing world. But I love that it keeps coming up to know that world, whether you're pitching and you're saying, I'm going to go to this broadcaster or these producers and tell you about my idea, but it has to fit into the world of what you make and what you do. And when you go in as a director, the showrunner's vision, and some of us, you know, you're on a show that's just getting off the ground, and everyone is there. Like, every executive is there at the beginning of a show, and everyone has to be firing on all cylinders. So it's nice to hear that you have that way of putting your touch and your taste onto coming into an existing vision.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say, like Joyce was saying, like, they hired you for a reason. So they don't just, you know, like, it's not a blind hire. You get me? Like, they know who you are. They've seen your work. You know, you've probably had a meeting or two with them beforehand so they can get to know you as a person, but they've seen the stuff that you've done before and whatnot. So they know who you are. So like Joyce was saying, it's like, research the show and then figure out how what you bring fits into that. And it may be something, maybe it's your niche is working with the actors, or, you know, like Joyce and Sid coming from a camera background, maybe it's in the camera department where you're gonna sit and talk with the DP and be like, hey, I wanna use like this lens, or let's light it this way, or whatever that may be, but that comes from the research, right? Like I said, I watch every episode of as much as I possibly can of every single show. When I worked on Murdoch,
Same.
I literally watched all 16 seasons before I got on the show.
I'm so sorry.
It's dedication. Okay, so it feels really pertinent because we are here at Reelworld. We're at the Reelworld Summit, and there are so many of us now. We see the conversation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, going past a conversation, and we are stepping into those rooms of power and influence. So I want to ask you a question that is slightly personal, but I feel very powerful. If you could go back to a situation in which you did not stand up for yourself in a way that you wish you had, what would you say now to that former version of yourself? And how would you advise them in that situation from your current position?
I love that you asked that question, because I was just going to say there's a secret to Episodic on how to be asked is push back. If you don't ever push back, if you just agree to everything, they might not hire you again. It's kind of like when I'm working with actors and they have a lot of questions for me, it tells me they give a shit. You know, and I always tell every actor, please ask away. Don't be quiet. It makes me know that you care. So that when you're an episodic director and you push a little bit, push back, meaning, or you push the thing that you want just a little bit, just keep going a little, it shows that you care, that you're passionate about it. And I wanted to keep adding, but I forgot the question.
What is a situation in which you didn't stand up for yourself in the way you wish you had, and how would you advise that version of you now?
There was once I was doing something and I had a whole plan, and I brought it up for the master, and the producer came on and he said, and he looked at it and he just came on and he said, I'll never use that. He didn't even see how I blocked it. He didn't see what I was going to do. He's like, no, I would never use that. It's like, oh. And at that moment I should have pushed back. I'm like, you didn't even look at the blocking. Just let me do this, let me do that. And then afterwards, if you need something else, ask me for it, for sure. But for him to have said, I'm not even going to use that, when he didn't even know how I was going to block it, that's an instance where I should have pushed back.
But now you would.
Now I would.
Now
Yeah. This was years ago, yeah.
What about you, Cash? Okay, you could go last. Joyce, do you have a situation that comes to mind where you did not stand up for yourself in a way that you wish you had, and how would you advise yourself now?
Man, that's hard. I think like every kind of like thing that happens to you, I find is like a learning experience. And I find that those chips on your shoulders are actually kind of helpful to like for the present, because it makes you so much more active now, you know, in situations that matter than like before. Because like, you know, when I was coming up, there's a lot of sexist, racist stuff that's kind of is set aside, right? But you're in like such a powerless position, like you could get fired for like saying anything, you know? Like in kind of those hierarchical kind of production structures that unfortunately still exist. But I find that like remembering those things that happened and now being like in a position where I have more agency, like allows me to act in a way that's like, no, I'm not gonna take that anymore, right? Like whether or not it's like, you know, just microaggressions where, you know, it's like firm but corrective corrections, you know, or just kind of blatant disregard for union rules, you know, where like a PA might not speak up because they might not get hired again, but as like a more senior member of the union, like you need to say things, you need to stand up for yourself in order that everyone else can also benefit from it, you know?
That's powerful, truly. Did you think of one?
I mean, in a working setting, like on set, or just in general, like.
I mean, in a working scenario for sure, but just in general in life, like I love to have that honest conversation because we're all on a healing and empowering journey, right? Mm-hmm. And we look back sometimes at the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and as you step into a new room, I feel that's when the re-triggering of the wave will come to me, where I'll be suddenly remembering times I didn't stand up for myself. And I feel like that those are the opportunities where our ancestors get to show up for us and say, wow, look at the privilege of what you get to do. And it's okay that you didn't know what to do then, but what are you gonna do now? Like to your point, it's so powerful to say, with this agency and power I have, maybe I can speak up about X or Y or Z, and then through that you will definitely empower someone else to do it. I think it's important, especially stepping into the world of episodic directing, you're going into someone else's world, like how do you show up for yourself now where maybe a past version of you didn't have the language or didn't have the guts or whatever?
I mean, I'll say how I show up for myself is, I used to get prejudged a lot coming from the music video world and having predominantly worked on genres of black music, right? Meaning that being the work, my body of work that was at the forefront of my music video career, and people kind of dismissing the fact that I hadn't just worked on like genres of black music, I had also done like rock videos, country music videos, that sort of stuff. So it's like when I was actively trying to push to come into the episodic world, and particularly Canadian television, which there isn't a lot of content that is minority focused in the episodic world in Canada on TV, and people just sort of looking at me like, these shows aren't for you because you're a black female director that comes from working with rappers, like you know how to shoot flashy cars and like big booty models, you know what I mean? Like that was pretty much.
Not mad at that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, I'm not gonna lie, but I'm just like, okay, but again, like I said, I like all genres of music, and I had worked and directed all genres of music, although the ones that were for black genres of music were the ones that, got me accolades and most of my recognition, that doesn't mean that I can't adapt to other things. And I just like, I started going into meetings and just telling these people that are like, this show isn't for you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, first of all, I'm a 9th generation Canadian. Okay, like 9 generations. My family's been here for over 200 years, and you make Canadian television. So, what do you mean this show isn't for me? I'm a Canadian, very Canadian, and you make a Canadian television show. And also, I was raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia, okay? It's the land of Anne Murray, okay? So it's like, we live on CBC, we live on all these, Canadian, TVO. Like, I guarantee you there's no director that you guys are meeting with that knows Canadian television more than myself, coming from rural Nova Scotia where that's all we can watch, So trust me, I know how to direct your show because I've spent my entire life watching it. Like, you know what I'm saying? My mom watches Coronation Street and Murdoch Mysteries, and like my family's homes in Nova Scotia, the stations, the TVs live on CBC, like all the Canadian stuff. Like, and there was no, streaming or nothing like that. So it's like that. This is literally all I know.
Well, you don't let stereotypes or other people's perceptions limit what you came here to do.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
so
let them
important.
judge me just based off of my the book. Like flip the pages and learn a little bit more about me before you tell me if I can't, like this show isn't for me. And every single show that I've worked on to date, they're like, wow, like
that's what I'm saying. Because
we'll see you next season.
That pushback piece is sometimes I feel in the arts, people don't even know that they need the medicine you've got, and then you just have to push for your vision, and then later the light goes off and they're like, oh wow, okay, I get it. So we're gonna wrap up our panel. We're so excited that you're here. I have a fun question to wrap up on, and it is, because it is a manifestio shit era, and I am a very powerful manifester, I want to know if there is a show that you are dreaming of directing on, and why. There's the powerful manifesting space. All of you there, you sprinkle yourselves with the magic, and you sprinkle a friend. You sprinkle a friend, or sprinkle me, Joyce.
I just created a show, so I want to show run and do my own show, because that means years of work, hopefully, not just a month of work. It's like I want to keep going, So that would be the dream, is to show run, like you were saying, show run your own show, and get to direct some as well.
It is done.
I think that I agree with you. That's what the goal is. Somebody was having a conversation with a showrunner yesterday, actually, and they were because they were asking me about my experience. I worked on Heartland this summer, and they're like, how was that like? And then we started talking about how there are shows that kind of represent the different regions of Canada, but there isn't a show that represents where I come from, like Nova Scotia. Like Sullivan's Crossing is filmed there, but it's not really about life there. Like you have shows like, Run the Burbs, or like, Children Ruin Everything, that sort of represent central Canada. Then you have like Heartland, that's like the west, and you have like Schitt's Creek, it's like Newfoundland and shows like that, but there's nothing that represents like Nova Scotia. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I gotta make it then. I was like, I feel like that's what they're telling me to do. So yeah, I think that would be real cool to create and show run a show that is authentically Nova Scotian.
It's unfolding as we speak, my friend.
Yeah.
Joyce, what about you?
I'm gonna be boring and say the same thing. Like I have a show in development with Belle right now, so I really hope it gets greenlit.
Yeah! Okay, that's amazing. And you know what? I have the same answer. Everyone in this room, whatever you're creating, believe that that was put on your heart for a reason. It wouldn't be in your heart if you did not have the skills, the talent, and the ability to pull it off. So we're going to give a warm round of applause for our directors, and thank you so much to the Reelworld for putting on a phenomenal summit. And I am going to ask you to sprinkle yourselves with some magic. Yes, we believe. And then you sprinkle your friends. Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the summit.